All right, so we're talking about James 2, and we've been talking about faith without works is dead. That's the old way we always heard it said. And James is making the case for active faith in the chapter. And I was reading, it must have been last Thursday morning because I came across this after our class period. So it had to be late last week. But Dale Jenkins, he wrote this little book with his brother Jeff called Biblical Keys to Effective Ministry. And and these are like one page chapters. They're brief. They're more like little articles, but it was called Faith, Active and Real. And in the article, Dale was comparing faith to paint. And he made the point that paint is useless where? In the can. As long as it's in the can, it's useless. And if you leave it in the can long enough, we've all had this one happen. You got to go touch something up, and you're like, "Hey, I've still got some of that paint." And you open the paint, and what? It's ruined. It's no longer any good. And so paint will eventually go bad in the can. And so his exhortation in the article is, "Hey, you better start painting because paint's not valuable till you get it out of the can and put it on the wall." And so I thought, when you start thinking about active faith, that was pretty good. And it was really timely because it was, following our Wednesday evening discussion. So let's do 18 and 19. Somebody, if you would, don't mind, read those two verses for us.
Now, someone may argue some people have faith, others have good deeds, but I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have good deeds? You say you have faith. Do you believe that there is one God?
Okay. And then he's going to say, "How foolish, can't you see that faith without deeds is useless?" So it's another example from him about the idea that faith needs to be active. It's got to be some more than some mental agreement, mental assent with an idea. And so he's saying faith, as in mental agreement, and works are not alternative expressions of the Christian religion. It can never be either or. It's got to be both and. And he's saying if it was just about believing, even the demons would be in good shape. And of course, the demon stuff fascinates us. Why? Or maybe it doesn't fascinate you. I don't know. But it's sort of fascinating because it's something that we kind of see going on during Jesus' ministry, but not so much after. Why? It would seemingly be to help confirm his ministry, confirm his word, confirm his power. Because it's interesting, when he interacted with demons and he told the demon to do something, how did the demon always respond? Had to obey, had to do what Jesus said to do. You never see the demon. They push back a little bit. Hey, send us into the pigs. But when Jesus said, "You're coming out of that guy," it wasn't a question of whether they were going to come out of it. It was a question of where they were going to go. They had to obey him. Now, it's different for us. We've been given a bunch of different commands, but we have a choice to make. There are consequences attached to the choice, but it's not like where Jesus says, "Josh, do X, Y, or Z." It's not like you're forced to do those things. You have free will. Demons seemingly had to obey and do what Jesus said. And he's saying, well, and the other thing the demons often did, and sometimes Jesus would even stop them from speaking, but when they spoke, what did they say about him? Often. They knew who he was. They did not, it wasn't like they didn't believe that he was who he said he was. And so he's just making the point that, the demons recognized Jesus for who he was. They believed he was the Son of God. They knew he was the Son of God. That didn't make them right with God. And so James is just using that as sort of an example to say, just because you believe who God is and know who God is, That doesn't make you right with God. Your faith has to be active. So I thought it might be worth spending a few minutes. Um, when we were talking about James over at the assisted living place, I asked the ladies over there, okay, so what would active faith look like for somebody who's advanced in years? Because most of them, they are there and they can't like just jump in the car and leave. A few of them can, but not for the most part. And so they don't have the mobility they once had. They don't have the energy they once had. There's a lot of differences in their lives from when they were young. And so we try to talk about what would an active faith look like. But there's probably value in us trying to talk about that in here as well. What does an active faith look like for an adult who is potentially married and raising kids? What does that, what does an active faith look like? You're holding up the idea of modesty tonight. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Bikers are spiritual, aren't they? Some of them are. That's good. No riding your bike 80 and trying to elude the police.
It was really funny you say that because last night I had a conversation because I didn't know there's a preacher at the chicken plant that prays for
Really?
before. But we were talking about I mean, there are ways where it's in the flesh, but people chicken that make it like that.
Okay. But going back to where you started, I think that's good. What else would you say? What does active faith look like?
I was just like, from the Chelsea, actually cried about food. And active faith is like, we talk about, we see a person on the road at the intersection. We see them, sometimes we interact with them.
Right.
But an active faith is we're going out and seeking someone, not waiting for the opportunity to arrive, but actually go and seek someone. As in, we're going to the shelters, or we're making a meal, we're taking it somewhere, we're not waiting on the text, somehow to say, Walter needs food this week, we have to take it on ourselves. When that is produced and executed.
Proactive.
Yeah, God.
Okay.
That is what.
I like that.
Don't be not. Just go.
Okay. Anything else that you would throw out there for our consideration? Because one of the questions I was going to ask in leading into this that I didn't, one of the things I jotted down is attendance at services the equivalent to active faith? Okay. But you would call it part. Right.
Not the whole.
Right. And I think that's what I'd want to drive toward there. Because our attendance, when we come to worship, we're here to offer something up to God. And it's not so much, there's a byproduct that we bless each other through our worship. But if my attendance is my sole activity, then it probably means there's something lacking.
Where you say, I love Jesus, but oh, Jesus, why ugly? I want to avoid that.
Yeah. And a lot of people do try to make a separation there for sure.
And that's right.
Right. I jotted down perhaps the idea of doing God stuff over safe stuff or easy stuff. Sometimes the things we need to do for God aren't going to be the easiest things to do, and when I say safe, I'm thinking in terms of the things that keep us in our comfort zones versus the things that get us out of our comfort zones. Get out of your comfort zone. Do you always feel safe? No, because you're no longer controlling the narrative. You don't know what's going to happen next. You got to be ready to react. And so, outside the comfort zone can feel unsafe. And then, really, as far as active faith goes, um, and even when you think in terms of the connection to evangelism, if you're a parent, your primary evangelism is focused where, or should be focused where? Right. I mean, that is a number one. And so, if you really want to get in the kitchen or get into the potential of offending people, is active faith maybe less sports? I signed my kid up for one or two less things so that more spiritual stuff will fit. I mean, that could be one aspect of what an active faith would look like, because I realized that the faith of my kids is going to be built based on how involved they are with the church. And so that might mean, well, maybe I sign them up for one thing less over here. It's not that we're not going to, it's a different world. I mean, I played on a basketball team in the winter, and I played on a baseball team in the summer until my eyes got bad and I didn't know it. And I just was a mental wreck because I couldn't hit anymore. And then they figured out I needed glasses and it was just too late. But, it wasn't like every month there was another activity to be in. It's a different world. And so, my parents didn't have to make those kind of choices because there wasn't as many options.
These either 4 days or multiple days. And this. When it comes.
Right.
It's your greatest commandments, right? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
And you can live that. That's what.
Right.
Empathy for other people, and your life is all about me. My life is all about
Right.
me. That's
Right.
not an active thing.
Right.
Going out. Even a parking spot. Like,
Right.
comes down to everything. About other people, or is my life all about me? That's not what an active thing.
Right.
You're frustrated at the grocery store with them. In line, worried about other people.
I'm still getting over having to be my own checker outer person, but I have realized sometimes we're getting pretty good at it. Sometimes we're faster than. Would you?
On there, click it.
Yeah.
Paper.
Well, they're using data technology. I mean, it looks like it's like if you get on a computer that's not been updated or you're old. Yeah, it's old technology. Because there was a time when some of the other stores, if it didn't feel the thing hit, it'd be like, you didn't put that in the bag. And then they finally realized that's just not going to work. And so a lot of stores got rid of it. But of course, I guess if you ask them about it, they'd tell you that's how we're saving you all this money is we're running old technology. But anyway, but all that was well said about active faith. And see, to me, if we read through this and we can talk about it in theory, but if we don't actually talk about what that's supposed to look like at our stage of life, then maybe we've not really covered it the way we should. And so I did want to spend a few minutes there. And so I appreciate the comments. But let's go ahead and try to do these. Somebody read 21 to 24.
Don't you remember that your ancestor Abraham was shown to be right with God? He offered his son Isaac on the seconds. So it happened to say Abraham counted him as righteous because of his faith. He received all the praise of God. So you see, we are shown to be right with God by what we do, not by faith alone.
Okay. So he's putting the two things together. So if you're a Jew and you're getting this letter from James, and all of a sudden James is talking about Abraham, what does that mean to you? Is he just an ancestor? Or is he more than just an ancestor? Who's Abraham to the average Jew? He's an icon, is he not? I mean, this is like, if you play basketball, this is like an example from Michael Jordan or LeBron, except in this case, Abraham's actually is your ancestor. He's family. He's a Jew. And so you're going to listen and you're going to pay attention. And so he goes to one of their icons and says, look at how he lived his life. In God's eyes, Abraham offered his son up to God, even though Isaac didn't actually die. I said a minute ago, could active faith sometimes be when we do God stuff over safe stuff or easy stuff? And I don't know if anybody could be called to anything more difficult than what God called Abraham to. And Abraham's ready to do it. And he gets credit as having done it. And so as a result, I think the New American Standard says his faith was perfected, or the New Living, his actions made his faith complete. And, his whole life is, from the time God calls him, is one of just stepping out on faith. Because you're leaving home, you're going to a place you don't know, all of it. So Abraham, if you're a Jew, that ought to have your attention as a really good example of what this looks like. And then he's going to give another example. Somebody read 25 through and 26.
No, you were shown to be right with God by your actions. Messenger, and them with the throat. Just as the body is bread. So open the faith without good work.
Okay. We'll talk more about 26, but he talks first about Rahab. Turn back to Joshua 2, and let's just run through that real quick. First 7 verses. I think we've got time. Joshua 2, 1 through 7. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Cove, maybe saying that wrong. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the two men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. And probably what we might think of as a tavern slash inn city would have a place like this where guests would come and prostitution's probably going on, but you can also stay there anyway. That's where they stay. If you're the king, it makes a lot of sense to have a spy or an informant in a place like that. Why? If somebody comes into town, where are they likely going to go? Likely to the inn, likely to this place where visitors would come. Seems to be what's going on. So, verse 2, someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the man who's come into your house, for they've come here to spy out the whole land. Rahab had hidden the two men, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. Lie number 1. They left town at dusk as the gates were about to close. Lie number 2. I don't know where they went. Lie number 3. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them. Lie number 4. Actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath the bundles of flax she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. As soon as the king's men had left, the gates of Jericho were shut. And so later on, when the coast is clear, she turns them loose and they make the big promise about saving her when the walls of Jericho fall. Do you see any problems with this? Well, it's one of those where, because you come over here to James and he says Rahab the prostitute is another example of good. She was shown to be right with God by her actions when she hid those messengers and sent them safely away by a different road. Is the Rahab situation supportive of situation ethics? Seems in her case, I don't know what to do with it. Could she have potentially told the truth and God still found a way to take care of those men? Maybe. I don't know. It's an interesting situation. Her heart evidently was trying to do the right thing.
Right?
I'll say that part again.
So we don't know that what told Rahab they were coming.
No, we don't know that, but she knew enough to know she needed to keep them safe somehow. And I'd love the text a lot more if she could have found a way to keep them safe without blatantly lying. Because what does God say about lying? He doesn't say, well, if it's to protect somebody or if the situation calls for it he doesn't say that. And in a dire situation, it might be something we could get away with. But I don't think so. So that's self-defense. Yeah. And so maybe it's a self-defense sort of situation. Yeah. You got to figure out a way to deal with it because she for sure doesn't tell the truth. She keeps the guys safe and she gets credit for doing the right thing in the book of James. Right, right. She knew she wanted God on her side more so than the king of Jericho. She knew enough to know that. It's one of those weird ones that that'll be, you just kind of have to think about it. But the bottom line is her faith was active. And it demonstrated that she cared enough about who God was that she wanted to keep God's spies safe. And then, later on, she ends up being in the lineage. She ends up in the lineage of Jesus, Matthew 1, verse 5. So Barclay summarizes the end of the book like this. He says, unless Abraham had faith, he would have never answered the call and the summons of God at all. Unless Rahab had faith, she would have never have taken the risk of identifying her future with the fortunes of Israel, which is really what she was doing. I'm going to protect these guys, and I'm going to hope that Israel will take care of me when they destroy this city, or when God destroys this city. And then he says, these two examples, Abraham and Rahab, show fully that faith and deeds are not opposites. They are, in fact, inseparables. And that's the point. And he concludes in verse 26, just as the body is dead without breath, so also faith is dead without good works. So it's an interesting one. I don't have a great answer for it. And maybe John's answer is as good as any you can come up with. Self-defense. Anything else y'all want to say about active faith? Self-defense, lying. Honey, tell Olivia to be on the lookout for that. Yeah.
And it comes down to what is God's will in that situation. That's the overarching thing there, right?
Right.
So what's more important than that?
Right. Protecting them the best way she knows how in the moment.
I think we run into those situations sometimes in our lives where we have.
Right.
Going through one right now.
Right.
I mean, you have to. It's impossible sometimes to have 100% clarity on what you're supposed to be doing in some situation. You have to ultimately fall back to my trust in God and my putting Him first.
Right.
Am I living life with great word on?
Right. That's what it has to come down to. That's right. And about Him instead of about me, like you were saying earlier. So really good point. Really good point. All right. Well, Lord willing, we'll start James 2 or 3. What are 3 next week? And then the week after that, it'll be the Josh show. And then 2 weeks later, it'll again be the Josh show. That'll be good. It'll be good. So.